All of the water on the planet today was here before humans even existed. We have yet to figure out how to make more. To put a number on it, that's roughly 1 sextillion 260 quintillion litres of water on Earth. 97% of that is salt water, and the majority of the remaining fresh water is frozen in ice caps and glaciers. So what's actually accessible is just a fraction of a fraction. Funneling enough of the world's fresh water to where it's most needed is difficult at the best of times, and it's only going to get worse. 17 countries are under extremely high water stress, using over 80% of all the water they have every year. Usually, these countries are dry to begin with, and poor infrastructure contributes to wasted water. The climate crisis further exacerbates the reliability of the water supply, with erratic rainfall and hotter days. When droughts do hit, they can be devastating. Cape Town nearly ran out of dam water in 2018 and only narrowly avoided a crisis. A human can only survive a few days without water. It can take 3,500 litres of water to grow the food each person needs per day. That's over 1 litre per calorie consumed. It takes 15,400 litres of water on average for every kilogram of beef you eat. That's about 50 bathtubs full of water. In 1995, then World Bank Vice President Dr. Ismail Serageldin said, "If the wars of this century were fought over oil, the wars of the next will be fought over water, unless we change our approach to managing this precious and vital resource." The research indicates he's onto something. The United Nations anticipates that 2/3 of the world's population will live in water-scarce regions by 2025. Intense water scarcity could displace 700 million people globally in the years following. The chance of cross-border conflicts over water could rise by 95% in the next century. The UN also pinpoints 5 hotspots for future water wars: the Nile, Ganges-Brahmaputra, Indus, Tigris, Euphrates, and the Colorado rivers. But disputes over water aren't something new. There have been at least 655 instances of conflict over water throughout history. However, fewer than 30 of them resulted in armed aggression. Scarcity is actually less likely to cause conflict than other factors, such as the threat of a water source being tampered with by, say, pollution or an upstream dam. Egypt, for instance, has ongoing disputes with many of the 9 nations upstream along the Nile, which regularly runs dry before it reaches the ocean. One of those countries, Ethiopia, is currently building a hydroelectric dam, which Egypt sees as a threat to its precious water supply. This is the latest incarnation of a dispute along the Nile that goes back centuries. Historically, water disputes have been one of many triggers in broader political tensions. Let's look at Kashmir. Pakistan and India both claim ownership of the region and the water that runs through it. A 1960 treaty that divvies up the coveted tributaries of the Indus River has actually held up well through the years. Still, tensions over dams built upstream or diverted water flow have added to the turmoil between the two nuclear-armed nations. A 2018 IMF report ranked Pakistan 3rd amongst countries facing acute water shortages. As the Himalayan glaciers that feed the Indus melt due to climate change, tensions will only rise. Another modern example of water-fueled political strife is in Syria. The civil war in Syria began for a wide variety of reasons, but some analysts argue one key factor was water. Syria is one of the driest countries in the world. A drought from 2006 to 2011 caused 75% of farms to fail and 85% of Syria's livestock to die, causing food and water insecurity. As a result, 1.5 million people, mostly farmers and agricultural workers, moved into cities to find work. The deteriorating economy combined with the birth of the Islamic State group, the spread of protests from the Arab Spring, and other complex factors set the stage for the social unrest that roiled into a civil war in 2011. A war that has led to the death of over 500,000 people and displaced 12 million people, over half of the population. This is how the water wars of the future will likely look. Water scarcity contributes to economic and food insecurity, social structures weaken, and violence erupts. Now in India, the groundwater feeding the Ganges has decreased by 50%, leaving those downriver facing irrigation and food shortages. 400 million people depend on the Ganges in both India and Bangladesh, which have been fighting over how to effectively divert and divvy up this resource since the 1970s. Finally, let's look at the fifth potential conflict area pinpointed by the United Nations. The Colorado River supplies water to many large cities in the southwest United States, including Los Angeles, serving almost 40 million people and irrigating nearly 5.5 million acres of land. But thanks to climate change and increased damming, it also frequently runs dry before it reaches Mexico. As more people and places rely on this dwindling river resource, tensions may rise and result in friction. On the other side of the US-Mexico border is an adjacent crisis. Desperate families from El Salvador, Guatemala, and more are fleeing not only violence, but extreme poverty and food and water insecurity. The World Bank estimates that up to 4 million people from Mexico and Central America could be displaced by climate change in the next 30 years. Worldwide, 16 million people were displaced by weather-related disasters in 2018. A quarter of the global population is running out of water. But there are some real, actionable measures that can help turn the tide. Cape Town was narrowly able to avoid day zero by adopting aggressive emergency measures like diverting water for agriculture to urban use, implementing water use tariffs, and restricting water use to 50 litres per person per day. But those aren't long-term solutions. What cities can do to promote sustainable water usage in the future is to invest in water infrastructure, recycle wastewater, swap out some hydration-intensive crops, and greatly reduce livestock. Until these solutions and others like it are enacted on a global scale, our limited supply of fresh water will continue to be a flashpoint for conflict. How we choose to deal with that will define the water wars of the future.